The rain came down like bullets that evening, turning the dirt road into a river of mud. Loretta Washington sat in her old wooden rocking chair on the porch, watching the storm roll across the Georgia countryside. At 72 years old, she'd seen plenty of storms in her lifetime. But this one had a different feel to it, angry, restless. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and took a sip of sweet tea. The thunder rumbled so loud it shook the windows of her little house. This was the house she and Raymond had built together back when their hands were young and strong. Now Raymond was 15 years gone, resting peacefully in the church cemetery down the road. And Loretta was here alone, listening to the rain hammer against the tin roof that desperately needed fixing. The leak in the bedroom had gotten worse last week. She'd placed 3 buckets to catch the drips. The sound kept her up most nights. Plink, plink, plink. But what could she do? Her monthly check barely covered the electric bill and groceries. A new roof might as well cost $1 million. Lightning split the sky. For just a second, everything lit up bright as day. That's when she saw it. A motorcycle, struggling through the flooded road right in front of her property. The engine made a sick, sputtering sound that even she could hear over the storm. Then it died completely, rolling to a stop maybe 20 feet from her mailbox. Loretta stood up slowly, her knees protesting like they always did. She squinted through the rain, watching as a large man climbed off the bike. He was massive, dressed head to toe in black leather, with a vest that had patches all over it. Even from this distance, she could see the tattoos covering his arms. But what made her heart squeeze was the small bundle he was carrying. It, wrapped in his leather jacket, soaked through despite his efforts to keep her dry. Every warning bell in Loretta's head started ringing. She'd seen enough news reports to know what those vests meant. Hell's Angels. Motorcycle gangs. Trouble. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was always saying, "Lock your doors, Loretta. This world isn't safe anymore." The man was trying to restart his motorcycle, yanking on something, kicking at it, but the engine was dead. The little girl in his arms was shaking, her small body trembling from the cold. Loretta could see it even from her porch. She thought about going inside, locking the door, pretending she hadn't seen anything. That would be the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But then the little girl coughed, a weak sound that somehow carried across the storm. And Loretta thought about her own daughter, Claire, who'd been taken by cancer 20 years ago. She thought about all the times she'd needed help when Claire was sick, and how grateful she'd been for every kind hand extended. "Lord have mercy," she whispered to herself. Then louder, calling out into the rain, "You there? You and your little one better come inside before you catch your death." The man's head snapped up. He looked at her with suspicion, his hand instinctively moving to shield the child. Loretta could see his face now, hard and weathered, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. He looked like someone who'd seen his share of fights and didn't trust easy. "I said, come on." Loretta waved her hand toward the house. "This storm isn't playing around, and that baby's freezing." The man hesitated, looking at his dead motorcycle, then at the road ahead, where the water was getting deeper by the minute. Finally, he made his decision. He lifted the child higher in his arms and jogged toward the porch, his heavy boots splashing through puddles. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Easily 6'3", with shoulders like a linebacker and arms covered in ink. A skull. An eagle. Words in script she couldn't quite read. His leather vest had patches that said Hell's Angels and Georgia Chapter. His dark hair was plastered to his head from the rain, and his eyes were a startling blue, sharp and cautious. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, his voice rough like gravel. "We won't trouble you long. Just need to wait out the worst of it." "Ma'am," Loretta said, already opening her front door. "Well, you can't wait it out standing there dripping. Come inside where it's warm." The inside of Loretta's house was small but spotless. Crocheted doilies on every surface. Pictures on the walls showing a life well lived. A wedding photo of her and Raymond, both young and glowing. Claire's school pictures, tracking her growth from gap-toothed first grader to beautiful high school graduate. The furniture was old but cared for. Everything in its place. The man stood awkwardly in the doorway, creating a puddle on the hardwood floor. The little girl peeked out from his jacket, her eyes huge and brown, rimmed with exhaustion. "Don't just stand there," Loretta said, bustling toward the linen closet. "You're making a mess. Here." She pulled out towels, her best ones with the blue flowers. "Dry yourselves off. I'll get some blankets and put on some coffee." "We're fine, ma'am, really." But even as he said it, the little girl shivered so hard her teeth chattered. Loretta gave him a look that had made grown men think twice back in her teaching days. "That child is not fine. Now sit down before you fall down." Something in her voice made him obey. He settled carefully onto the couch, like he was afraid he might break it, and started unwrapping the little girl from his jacket. She was maybe 7 or 8, with curly brown hair plastered to her head and clothes soaked through. Her lips had a blue tinge that Loretta didn't like one bit. "What's your name, baby?" Loretta asked gently, kneeling down with some effort to be at eye level with the child. The little girl looked at the man, asking permission with her eyes. He nodded slightly. "Riley," she whispered. Her voice was small and scared. "Riley, that's a beautiful name. I'm Miss Loretta. And what about your daddy here?" The man cleared his throat. "Name's Axel, ma'am. Axel and Riley," Loretta repeated, committing them to memory. "Well, Axel and Riley. First thing we need to do is get you both into dry clothes before pneumonia sets in." She disappeared into the bedroom and came back with an old sweatshirt of Raymond's that had somehow survived all these years, and a pair of his sweatpants. For Riley, she found one of Claire's old nightgowns, kept all this time in a drawer she rarely opened. "Bathroom's down the hall," she told Axel. "You can change in there. Riley, you come with me, sweetheart?" Riley looked at Axel again, and Loretta saw real fear in those young eyes. The child didn't want to be separated from her father, not even for a minute. "It's okay," Axel told her softly, his whole face changing when he looked at his daughter. All that hardness melted away, replaced by something tender. "Miss Loretta's being kind to us. I'll be right here." Reluctantly, Riley took Loretta's hand. Her little fingers were ice cold. In the bedroom, Loretta helped Riley out of her wet clothes, noticing how thin the child was. Too thin. Her ribs showed through her pale skin, and there were shadows under her eyes that no child should have. But Loretta didn't ask questions. Not yet. She just wrapped Riley in the warm nightgown and a thick blanket, rubbing her arms to help circulation. "Right there now," she said. "Better?" Riley nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. When they came back to the living room, Axel had changed into Raymond's old clothes. They were a bit small on him, tight across the shoulders, but dry. He'd draped his wet leather vest carefully over a chair, handling it like it was precious. Loretta noticed his knuckles were bruised and scabbed, like he'd been in a fight recently. "I'm making soup," Loretta announced, heading to the kitchen. "And I don't want to hear any arguments about it." Axel followed her, keeping Riley close to his side. "Ma'am, you don't have to do all this. We'll be out of your hair as soon as the rain lets up." Loretta pulled out a pot and started opening cans of chicken broth. "Honey, that rain isn't letting up anytime soon. Weatherman said this storm's sitting right on top of us for the next day or two." She glanced at the window where the rain was still coming down in sheets. "Besides, you can't ride that motorcycle anywhere in this flood. Road's probably washed out down by Miller's Creek anyway." She saw him tense, his jaw tightening. He walked to the window and looked out at the dark road, his eyes scanning like he was looking for something. "Or someone, you running from something, Axel?" The question came out before Loretta could stop it. He turned to face her, and for a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he said quietly, trying to run toward something actually. "Somewhere safe." Loretta stirred the soup, adding noodles and chicken from a can. She didn't push. She'd learned long ago that people told you what they needed to tell you in their own time. Riley had curled up on the couch, her eyes already drooping with exhaustion. Axel kept glancing at her, making sure she was still there, still safe. "Well," Loretta said finally, "safe is what we'll try to give you tonight. Tomorrow we can figure out the rest." Outside, the thunder rolled on, and somewhere in the distance, lightning struck a tree with a crack that sounded like the world breaking apart. But inside Loretta's little house, the soup bubbled warm on the stove, and 3 strangers sat down together at an old wooden table. not knowing yet how much they were all about to change each other's lives. The storm didn't let up that night. If anything, it got worse. Wind howled around the little house, rattling the windows and making the old walls creak. Loretta lay awake in her bed, listening to the familiar plink, plink, plink of rainwater hitting the buckets in her room. But tonight there were other sounds too. Footsteps in the hallway, the quiet murmur of a father's voice soothing his daughter back to sleep. She'd given them the spare bedroom, the one that used to be Claire's. It had taken her an hour to work up the courage to open that door and change the sheets. The room had sat untouched for years, exactly as Claire had left it before she went to the hospital that last time. Pink curtains, a collection of glass figurines on the dresser, pictures of her daughter's life frozen in time, but Riley had needed a bed, and Loretta had needed to remember that Claire would have wanted her room to comfort. Another child in need. Morning came gray and wet. Loretta woke to the smell of coffee brewing, which was strange because she hadn't set the pot. She put on her robe and shuffled to the kitchen. Her knees aching worse than usual from the damp weather, Axel stood at her counter, looking oddly domestic despite his size and tattoos. He'd found the coffee filters and figured out her ancient coffee maker. When he heard her come in, he turned quickly, almost defensive. "Sorry," he said. "Hope you don't mind. I'm used to getting up early, and I thought... ... Coffee's fine," Loretta said, easing herself into a kitchen chair. "How'd you sleep?" "Didn't really." He poured her a cup, remembering the cream and sugar she'd used last night. The small observation surprised her. Riley had nightmares. She gets them sometimes. As if summoned by her name, Riley appeared in the doorway wearing Claire's old nightgown. Her curly hair was a wild mess around her face, and she looked even smaller in the morning light. "Good morning, baby," Loretta said warmly. "You hungry?" Riley nodded shyly, moving to stand close to her father. Axel's hand automatically went to her shoulder. Protective and gentle, Loretta made pancakes the way she used to make them for Claire every Saturday morning. Riley's eyes got big when Loretta set the plate in front of her. Golden circles stacked high with butter melting down the sides. The child ate like she hadn't seen food in days. Loretta felt her heart squeeze tight. After breakfast, Axel insisted on washing dishes. While his hands were busy in the soapy water, Riley wandered over to the mantel where Loretta kept her photo albums. The little girl was drawn to a picture of Claire at about her age, holding a trophy from a spelling bee. "Who's that?" Riley asked quietly. Loretta came over and picked up the frame, running her thumb over the glass. "That's my daughter, Claire. She was about your age in this picture. Where is she now?" "She's in heaven, sweetheart. Has been for 20 years. Riley looked up at her with those big brown eyes. "My mom is gone too. But Daddy says she's not in heaven. He says she just didn't want to be a mama anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and sad. Axel's shoulders stiffened at the sink, but he didn't turn around. Loretta knelt down, ignoring the protest in her knees. "Well, sometimes grown-ups make choices that don't make much sense to the rest of us. But I can tell your daddy wants to be your daddy very much. That's clear as day." Riley nodded and went back to looking at pictures. She spent the next hour going through Loretta's albums, asking questions about each photo. Claire as a baby. Claire's first day of school. Claire graduating high school. Loretta found herself telling stories she hadn't told in years. Memories flowing out of her like water from a burst dam. Axel finished the dishes and started, looking around the house with a handyman's eye. He noticed the loose hinge on the cabinet door and fixed it without asking. Found a screwdriver in Raymond's old toolbox and tightened it up good as new. Then he replaced 2 burnt-out light bulbs Loretta had been meaning to change for months, but couldn't reach.
Oh.
"You don't have to do that," Loretta told him. "I know," he said simply. "But you're feeding us and giving us shelter. Least I can do is make myself useful." By afternoon, the rain had settled into a steady drizzle. Riley was playing with an old deck of cards Loretta had found, building a house on the living room floor. Axel stood by the window, watching the road like he'd been doing all day. His whole body was tense, alert. "You expecting someone?" Loretta asked, bringing him a fresh cup of coffee. He took the cup but didn't drink from it, hoping I'm not. You in some kind of trouble, Axel? He was quiet for a long time, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he wasn't sure he should say. Finally, he spoke. I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. And now some people want to make sure I don't talk about it. The kind of something. The kind that got an innocent person killed. His voice was flat, but Loretta could hear the pain underneath it. Some guys in my club, they were doing a deal. Drugs. It went bad, and a kid got caught in the crossfire. 17 years old, just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Loretta's hand went to her chest. Dear Lord. I told them I wanted out. Told them what they did was wrong, that we needed to go to the police. Do the right thing. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. They didn't take that well. Said I was either with the club or against it. Said if I talked to the cops, I'd be the next one in the ground. He glanced at Riley, making sure she couldn't hear, and they made it real clear that accidents could happen to little girls too. The threat hung in the air like poison. Loretta felt anger rise up in her chest, hot and fierce. She'd seen men like that before, back in the 60s, when she and Raymond had marched for civil rights. Men who used fear and violence to keep people quiet. So you ran, she said. I grabbed Riley and everything I could carry, and we've been moving ever since. 2 weeks now. I got evidence, pictures and recordings I made hidden somewhere safe, but I don't know who to trust. Some of the local cops, they look the other way when it comes to the club. Money changes hands. You know how it is. Loretta did know. She'd seen corruption up close, seen how power protected power. I just need to keep her safe, Axel continued, his voice cracking slightly. That's all that matters. Riley didn't ask for any of this. She deserves better than running and hiding. Yes, she does, Loretta agreed. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she said, I have a friend. Vernon. His grandson works for the FBI up in Atlanta. Not local police, federal. If anyone can help you do this right, keep you both safe, it'd be him. Axel turned to look at her, hope and suspicion fighting in his expression. Why would you help us? You don't know us. For all you know, I'm lying about all of this. Are you? No, ma'am. Then that's all I need to know. Loretta straightened her shoulders. My Raymond used to say that evil wins when good people stay quiet. He said it's not enough to be not bad. You have to be actively good. You're trying to do the right thing, even though it's hard and scary. That's the kind of thing worth helping. Axel's eyes got shiny, and he looked away quickly, blinking. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just let me make a phone call. That evening, while Riley was in the bathroom brushing her teeth with a toothbrush, Loretta had found still in its package. Axel noticed the buckets catching rainwater in Loretta's bedroom. Your roof's bad, he said. Stating the obvious. Been that way for months, Loretta admitted. Can't afford to fix it. I could fix it. Once the weather clears, I'm good with my hands, and I've done roofing work before. Axel, you don't have to. I want to, he interrupted. You're helping us when you don't have to. You're putting yourself at risk for people you've just met. Let me do this one thing. Loretta looked at this big, scary-looking man with his tattoos and his leather vest, and saw something she recognized. Decency, the real kind. The kind that showed up in actions, not words. Right, she said. If you're still here when the rain stops, you can fix my roof. But that night, Loretta woke to a sound that made her blood run cold. Riley was crying, not the quiet sniffles of a nightmare, but real sobs that carried through the thin walls. She got up and went to the spare bedroom, knocking softly. Come in, Axel's voice called. Riley was curled against her father's chest, her small body shaking with tears. Axel looked helpless, stroking her hair and murmuring comfort that wasn't working. What's wrong, baby? Loretta asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Riley's words came out between sobs. The bad men. Daddy, what if they find us? What if they hurt Miss Loretta because we're here? Axel's face went pale. Riley, baby, no one's going to hurt Miss Loretta. I won't let that happen. But Riley kept crying, and Loretta could see the fear in her eyes was real and deep. This child had seen too much. It's understood too much about the danger they were in. Loretta took Riley's small hand in her wrinkled one. You listen to me, sweetheart. I've been on this earth for 72 years. I marched with people who changed this country, faced down men meaner than any bad guys you can imagine. I'm not scared of bullies, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you or your daddy. You hear me? Riley nodded, her sobs quieting to hiccups. Besides, Loretta continued, tomorrow I'm calling my friend Vernon. We're going to make sure you and your daddy get somewhere truly safe, where those bad men can't ever hurt you again. Promise. Riley whispered, I promise. Riley finally fell asleep between Loretta and Axel, her hand holding tight to Loretta's finger like a lifeline. Axel met Loretta's eyes over his daughter's head. Thank you, he mouthed silently. Loretta just nodded. Outside, the rain finally started to slow. But inside that small bedroom, 3 people who'd been strangers just a day ago had somehow become something else. Something that felt almost like family. And tomorrow, Loretta would make that phone call. Tomorrow, they'd start fighting back. Morning came with clear skies for the first time in 3 days. Loretta woke up still in Claire's old bed, her back aching from the unfamiliar mattress. Riley was curled up between her and Axel, sleeping peacefully for the first time since they'd arrived. Axel was already awake. Staring at the ceiling with that worried look he always had, Loretta carefully extracted herself and went to make breakfast. While the bacon was sizzling in the pan, she picked up the phone and dialed Vernon's number. They'd been friends since grade school, back when this part of Georgia was a very different place for black folks. Vernon had moved to Atlanta 30 years ago, but they still talked every Sunday after church. Vernon, it's Loretta. I need to ask you about your grandson, the one who works for the FBI. 20 minutes later, she hung up with a plan. Vernon's grandson, Daniel, would drive down tomorrow morning. He'd meet them here, at the house, and hear what Axel had to say. If the evidence was real and solid, he could start the process of getting them into protective custody, while building a case against the club members involved. One more day, Loretta told Axel over breakfast. Can you hold on one more day? Axel nodded, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Yeah, we can do one more day. After breakfast, true to his word, Axel went outside to assess the roof damage. Riley helped Loretta with the dishes, standing on a step stool to reach the sink. The little girl was humming softly, some tune Loretta didn't recognize, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Peaceful, even. That's when Loretta saw it through the kitchen window. A black SUV, driving slowly down her road. Too slowly. The kind of slow that meant someone was looking for something. Or someone. Her heart started beating faster. Riley, honey, go to your room for a minute, okay? But we're not done with the dishes. I know, baby, but I need you to go to your room right now. Can you do that for me? Something in Loretta's voice made Riley obey without asking more questions. The little girl climbed down from the step stool and hurried down the hallway. Loretta went to the front door and called up to the roof. Axel, company. He was down the ladder in seconds, his face going hard when he saw the SUV. It had stopped at the end of her driveway, just sitting there. The windows were tinted dark, but Loretta could feel eyes watching them. Get inside, Axel said quietly. Lock the doors. This is my house, Loretta said firmly. I'm not hiding in my own house. The SUV doors opened, and 3 men got out. They wore leather vests, just like Axel's, covered in patches and pins. The one in front was tall and rail-thin, with a shaved head and a beard down to his chest. The other 2 were muscle, the kind of men hired to intimidate. They walked up the driveway like they owned the place. Boots crunching on the gravel. Loretta stepped out onto her porch, and Axel moved to stand slightly in front of her, protective but not blocking her completely. Well, well, the thin man said, his voice like oil. Here's our boy Axel. Been looking for you, brother. I'm not your brother, Reaper, Axel said. His voice was steady, but Loretta could see his fists clenched at his sides, so this was Reaper. The name fit him. Everything about the man seemed dead, from his cold gray eyes to his thin-lipped smile that held no warmth. Now that's hurtful, Reaper said. stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. We're all brothers in the club. You took an oath, remember? Brotherhood for life. That was before you killed a kid. Accidents happen. That's why we need to stick together. Take care of our own. Can't have you running off making people ask uncomfortable questions. Reaper's eyes slid to Loretta. And who's this? Your grandmother. Loretta drew herself up to her full height, which wasn't much, but she'd learned long ago that dignity wasn't about size. This is my property, and you're not welcome here. Reaper laughed, and the sound made her skin crawl. Feisty old lady. I like that. Listen, Grandma, we just need to have a conversation with our friend here. Club business. Why don't you go inside and let the men talk? Why don't you get off my property before I call the sheriff? The sheriff? Reaper's smile widened. Oh, that's rich. You go ahead and call Sheriff Thompson. We play poker together every Thursday night. Real friendly guy? Loretta's blood ran cold, but she didn't let it show on her face. She'd been threatened by experts during the civil rights movement, men who thought they could scare her into silence. This punk, with his dead eyes and his leather vest, didn't frighten her half as much as those men had. And she'd stood up to them too. I said, get off my property. Her voice was loud and clear. The same voice she'd used to command a classroom full of rowdy teenagers for 30 years. My neighbor's son is deputy sheriff over in Clayton County, and I've got his number on speed dial. I've also got Mr. Patterson across the road watching us right now. This was partly a lie. Mr. Patterson was probably asleep in his recliner like he was every afternoon. But Reaper didn't know that. I've already told several people about my guests. Loretta continued, warming to her theme. So if anything happens to me, or to them, there'll be a lot of questions asked. A lot of attention on this situation. That what you want? Attention? She saw something flicker in Reaper's eyes. Uncertainty, maybe, or calculation. Men like him operated in shadows, away from the light of scrutiny. One of the muscle men shifted, his hand moving toward his waistband. Axel tensed, and Loretta knew with sick certainty that the man had a gun. Let's not do anything stupid, Reaper said, holding up a hand to stop his guy. We're just having a conversation here. Right, Axel? Just talking? I've got nothing to say to you, Axel replied. See, that's where you're wrong. You've got plenty to say, and we need to make sure you're saying it to the right people. Or not saying it at all. Reaper took a step closer to the porch. Here's how this is going to work. You're going to come with us, have a nice ride, talk to some folks. And your little girl. He paused meaningfully. She'll be just fine here with Grandma. Nothing to worry about. You threatening my daughter? Axel's voice dropped to something dangerous. Not threatening. Promising. She'll be safe as long as you cooperate. But if you make things difficult, well, Reaper shrugged. Kids are fragile things. Accidents happen to them too. Loretta felt rage bloom in her chest, hot and fierce. Before she could think better of it, she spoke up loud and clear. You listen to me, you piece of garbage? I survived Jim Crow. I marched with people who changed this country, while men like you tried to stop us. I've been spit on, beaten, arrested, and threatened by people who made you look like a playground bully. So your little threat. They don't mean a thing to me, she pointed down the driveway. Now you get off my land before I do call the police. And let me tell you something else. I've got friends in the NACP, the ACLU, and the Southern Baptist Convention. I've got a nephew who works for the Atlanta Journal. You want to start a war with a 72-year-old black woman who's got nothing to lose? You want that kind of publicity for your little club? Because I promise you, I'll make enough noise that every news station in Georgia will be parked on this road by tomorrow. The silence that followed was thick. Reaper's smile had frozen on his face, and for the first time, he looked uncertain. Loretta had called his bluff and raised him, and he knew it. You're making a mistake, Reaper said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. The only mistake is you still standing on my property. Reaper stared at her for a long moment, then at Axel. We'll be watching. Every move you make, we'll know about it. You can't hide forever, and it's a good thing we're not hiding, Loretta shot back. We're right here in plain sight, and we're not going anywhere. Reaper turned and walked back to the SUV, his men following. But before he got in, he called back, "See you soon, Axel." Real soon. The SUV pulled away, kicking up dust. Loretta waited until it was out of sight before her knees started shaking. She grabbed the porch railing to steady herself. "Miss Loretta." Axel's hand was on her elbow, supporting her. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she said, but her voice trembled. "Just need to sit down for a minute." Riley appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Are the bad men gone?" "Yes, baby," Loretta managed. "They're gone." But she knew they'd be back. Men like Reaper didn't take being stood up to very well, especially not by an old woman. They'd proved she couldn't be easily intimidated. But that just made them more dangerous. Axel helped her inside and made her sit down. He poured her a glass of water, his hands shaking slightly. "You shouldn't have done that. You should have let me handle it." "Handle it? How?" "They had guns, Axel. And they were threatening Riley." "I know, but now you're on their radar. They know you're helping us." He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated and scared. "This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Getting innocent people hurt? It's too late for that now," Loretta said, taking a sip of water. "We're in this together, whether you like it or not." Riley climbed into Loretta's lap, something she hadn't done before. The little girl wrapped her arms around Loretta's neck and held on tight. "I was scared," Riley whispered. "Me too, baby," Loretta admitted. "Me too." That evening, nobody felt much like eating, but Loretta made sandwiches anyway. They sat around her kitchen table, the weight of what had happened pressing down on all of them. "Tomorrow," Loretta said firmly. "Tomorrow Daniel gets here, and we start fixing this properly. Just one more night. We can make it one more night." Axel nodded, but his eyes kept drifting to the windows, watching the road. Waiting for headlights that might mean more trouble, Loretta put Riley to bed early, reading her a story from one of Claire's old books. When the little girl finally fell asleep, Loretta went back to the living room where Axel was still keeping watch. "You should try to sleep," she told him. "Can't. What if they come back? Then we'll deal with it." Loretta sat down in her rocking chair with a heavy sigh. But staying up all night won't change anything. He sat in silence for a while, listening to the ordinary sounds of a country night. Crickets chirping. The old house settling. Somewhere far off, a dog barking. "Thank you, Axel," said finally, "for standing up to them. For protecting Riley. You don't have to thank me for doing what's right. Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have sent us away the moment they saw trouble coming." Loretta looked at this man, this father trying so hard to protect his daughter and do the right thing, even when it was dangerous. She thought about Raymond, about how he'd always said you measure a person not by how they act when things are easy, but by what they do when things are hard. "Most people aren't me," she said simply. Outside, a car drove past slowly. Both of them tensed, but it kept going, disappearing into the night. One more day. They just had to make it one more day. The sun was setting when Loretta noticed the black SUV parked on the side of the road. About 100 yards from her driveway, just sitting there, watching. They weren't even trying to hide anymore. "They're still out there," Axel said from his position by the window. He'd barely moved all afternoon, keeping watch like a sentinel. "I can see that," Loretta replied, stirring a pot of beef stew on the stove. Her hands were steadier than they'd been this morning, but her stomach was tied in knots. "Daniel said he'll be here first thing tomorrow. 8 o'clock sharp. We just need to make it through the night." Riley was drawing pictures at the kitchen table, using some old crayons Loretta had found in a drawer. The little girl was trying to act normal, but Loretta noticed how she kept the crayons close. Her shoulders hunched like she was trying to make herself smaller. "Invisible. Making your favorite," Loretta told her, trying to sound cheerful. "Beef stew with those big carrots you like." Riley looked up and managed a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. They ate dinner as the sky turned from orange to purple to black. Axel barely touched his food, too busy watching the road. The SUV's headlights came on as darkness fell. Twin beams pointed toward the house like accusing fingers. "Why don't they just leave?" Riley asked quietly. "Why do they have to be so mean?" Axel's jaw tightened, but before he could answer, Loretta spoke up. "Because some people think power and fear are the same thing, baby. They think if they scare folks enough, They can control them, but they're wrong. Fear only works if you let it. Are you scared, Miss Loretta? Loretta thought about lying, about being brave for this child who'd already seen too much. But she'd never been one for dishonesty. Yes, I'm scared. But being scared and being stopped are two different things. Your daddy taught me that, actually. Axel looked at her, surprised. I did. You did. You're scared. I can see it plain as day. But you're still doing the right thing. Still protecting Riley? Still trying to make sure those bad men face justice? That's real courage, the kind that matters. After dinner, Loretta ran Riley a bath and let her play with some old bath toys she found under the sink. Rubber ducks that had belonged to Claire, their colors faded but still floating. The sound of Riley's soft splashing was almost normal. It's almost peaceful. But when Loretta went back to the living room, the peace shattered. Axel was on his feet, his whole body rigid. There's another car. Coming up the road, Loretta's heart jumped into her throat. She looked out the window and saw headlights approaching, moving fast. For a terrible moment, she thought it was more of Reaper's people. But then the car passed under a streetlight, and she saw it was a sedan, not an SUV. The car slowed as it reached her driveway, then stopped next to the black SUV. Loretta couldn't see what was happening, but she could imagine the conversation. The new arrival asking questions. Reaper's men explaining they were keeping watch. The sedan sat there for maybe 5 minutes, then drove on. But it circled back 20 minutes later, making another slow pass. They're checking how serious the surveillance is, Axel said grimly. Seeing if we're really trapped here. Or maybe it's just someone lost, Loretta suggested. But she didn't believe it herself. By 9 o'clock, Riley was in bed. Clutching a stuffed bear that had been Claire's, Loretta had read her 3 stories. And the little girl had finally drifted off to sleep. Exhausted from the stress of the day, Loretta made coffee the strong kind. Because she knew neither she nor Axel would be sleeping tonight. They sat in the living room, lights off, so they could see outside better. The SUV was still there, a dark shape against the darker road. I should leave, Axel said suddenly. Take Riley and slip out the back. Cut through the woods. If we're gone, they'll have no reason to bother you. Don't be stupid, Loretta said sharply. First, they'd catch you before you made it half a mile on foot with a child. Second, you think they'd just forget about me after what I said to Reaper? I made myself part of this story and I don't regret it. Let's. We wait for Daniel. We do this right. The hours crawled by. 10 o'clock. 11. Midnight. Loretta dozed off in her chair around 1 in the morning, her head drooping forward. She woke with a start to find Axel shaking her shoulder gently. Someone's moving out there, he whispered. Loretta's heart hammered as she looked out the window. The SUV's doors had opened and she could see silhouettes of men getting out, stretching their legs. 3 of them. No, 4. More had arrived while she'd been dozing. They're just changing shifts or something, Axel said, but his voice was tight with worry. Probably. But then one of the men started walking toward the house. Slow, deliberate steps up the driveway. He stopped about halfway, just standing there in the darkness. Watching? What's he doing? Loretta whispered. Psychological warfare. Trying to rattle us. Axel's fists clenched. It's working. The man stood there for 10 minutes that felt like 10 hours, then turned and walked back to the SUV. Loretta let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. 2. A clock came and went. Then 3. Loretta made more coffee, her 3rd pot of the night. Her hands shook as she poured it, exhaustion and fear making her clumsy. You should try to sleep, Axel said. I'll keep watch. Can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see that Reaper man's face. She took a sip of coffee, burning her tongue. Tell me about Riley's mother. If you want to, I mean... Axel was quiet for a long moment. Her name was Christine. We met at a bar, one of those places where the club hung out. She was beautiful, wild. I thought I loved her, he laughed bitterly. She got pregnant, and I was happy about it. Thought we'd be a family? But she wasn't ready for that. Didn't want to be tied down with a baby and a biker boyfriend. She left. When Riley was 6 months old, Just packed her stuff one day while I was at work and disappeared. Left a note saying she was sorry, but she couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't be a mother, his voice cracked. Riley doesn't remember her. Sometimes I think that's a blessing. Sometimes I think it's the saddest thing in the world. You've done a good job raising her alone, Loretta said softly. She's a sweet girl, polite, kind. That comes from you. Hey. But this life, the club, it's no life for a kid. I knew that. I just didn't know how to get out without. He gestured vaguely at the window. Without this. At 4 a.m, Loretta got up to check on Riley. The little girl was sleeping peacefully, her face relaxed in a way it never was during the day. Loretta pulled the blanket up higher and smoothed Riley's curly hair back from her forehead. Such a sweet child. So much innocence threatened by such ugly things. She went back to the living room and found Axel examining something in his hands. It was a small photo, creased and worn from being carried in a wallet. Riley as a baby, maybe 1-year-old, grinning a gummy smile at the camera. She's my whole world, Axel said quietly. Everything I do, every choice I make, it's all for her. When those guys threatened her yesterday, I wanted to. He trailed off, but Loretta understood. She'd felt that same protective rage when Reaper had made his veiled threats. Tomorrow, Loretta promised. Tomorrow we get help, and this nightmare starts to end. But at 4:30, the nightmare got worse. Loretta heard it first. The sound of breaking glass, sharp and violent, coming from the back of the house. She and Axel both jumped to their feet. Another crash, then another. Someone was breaking her windows. Stay here, Axel ordered. Moving toward the back door? Like hell I will, Loretta shot back, grabbing the phone to dial 911, but before she could press the buttons, the landline went dead. Just a dull tone, then nothing. They'd cut her phone line. Axel reached the kitchen and flipped on the back porch light. 3 men stood in her yard, their faces covered with bandanas. One of them had a baseball bat. Another held a brick. They'd already broken 2 windows, glass scattered across her kitchen floor. This is your last warning, one of them shouted. Send Axel out, or we come in and get him. Riley appeared in the hallway, tears streaming down her face, awakened by the noise. Daddy. Everything happened at once. Axel turned to go to his daughter. The men outside started toward the back door, and Loretta made a decision. She grabbed the cast iron skillet from the stove, the heavy one she'd been cooking with for 40 years, and positioned herself between the back door and where Riley stood frozen in fear. You want to come in my house? She shouted at the men outside. You're going to have to go through me first. One of the men laughed and reached for the doorknob. But then, cutting through the darkness, came the beautiful sound of sirens. Police sirens, getting closer by the second. The men outside hesitated, looked at each other, then ran. They scattered like roaches when the light comes on, disappearing into the darkness of the woods behind Loretta's property. Axel ran to Riley, scooping her up in his arms. Loretta stood there with her skillet, her whole body shaking now that the danger had passed. 2 police cars pulled up, lights flashing. Loretta had never been so happy to see the police in her life. An officer got out, young and concerned. Ma'am, we got a call from a Mr. Patterson across the road. Said there was trouble here. Mr. Patterson. Bless that old man and his insomnia. He must have seen what was happening and called it in. As Loretta explained the situation to the police, as they documented the broken windows and took statements, she kept thinking one thing. Just a few more hours. They just needed to make it a few more hours until Daniel arrived. The police stayed until dawn, parked in her driveway. The black SUV had disappeared when they showed up. But Loretta knew Reaper's men were still out there somewhere, watching and waiting. When the first light of morning touched the sky, Loretta looked at Axel holding his sleeping daughter on the couch. She looked at her broken windows, at the glass she'd have to sweep up, and she thought about how much can change in just a few days. 3 strangers had walked into her life during a storm, and now, come hell or high water, she was going to make sure they made it through to the other side, because that's what family did. And somehow, without planning it, without even meaning to. That's what they'd become. Daniel arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, just as he'd promised. He was a tall man in his 30s, wearing a dark suit and driving an unmarked sedan. Vernon had called ahead to warn Loretta, so she'd been watching for him. When his car pulled into her driveway, she felt like she could finally breathe again. He had backup too. 2 more FBI agents in another car, and a local police unit that had been coordinating with them. The black SUV that had been lurking down the road took off the moment they saw the federal vehicles arrive. Running away like the cowards they were, Daniel showed his badge and shook Loretta's hand on the porch. "Mrs. Washington? I'm Special Agent Daniel Price. My grandfather Vernon speaks very highly of you." "Your grandfather's a good man," Loretta said. "Come in. We've been waiting for you." Inside, Axel was holding Riley close, both of them exhausted from the sleepless night. When Daniel entered, Axel stood up slowly, protective instincts on high alert even though help had finally arrived. "Mr. Garrett," Daniel said, using Axel's last name. "I understand you have information about a homicide that occurred 2 weeks ago." What followed was 3 hours of careful questioning. Daniel recorded everything while the other agents took notes. Axel told the whole story, every detail he could remember. The drug deal that went wrong. The 17-year-old boy caught in the crossfire, killed for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The club members involved trying to cover it up. The threats against Axel and Riley when he refused to stay quiet. Then Axel produced his evidence. He'd hidden a phone with photos and video recordings in a storage unit 2 towns over. And he gave Daniel the location and access code. Daniel sent agents to retrieve it immediately. "This is solid," Daniel said after reviewing what Axel had told him. "With this evidence and your testimony, we can build a strong case. But you understand what this means? You'll need to enter witness protection, you and your daughter both. New identities, new location. You won't be able to contact anyone from your old life." Axel looked at Riley, then at Loretta. "Whatever keeps her safe. That's all that matters." The next part happened quickly. Daniel made calls, coordinated with other agencies, set things in motion. By afternoon, arrangements were being made to move Axel and Riley to a safe house while the investigation proceeded. Federal charges would be filed against 6 members of the Hells Angels chapter, including Reaper, for murder, drug trafficking, and witness intimidation. But before they could leave, Axel had one thing he needed to do. "I'm fixing that roof," he told Loretta firmly. "I don't care if it takes all day. I'm not leaving until it's done." "Axel, you don't have time for that. These people need to get you somewhere safe. Then they can wait a few hours." He looked at Daniel. "Is that okay?" Daniel glanced at the broken windows, at the damage done to Loretta's home because she'd helped them. He nodded. "We can spare a few hours. I'll have officers keep watch while you work." So Axel went up on that roof with borrowed tools from Mr. Patterson across the road. The old man had come over that morning with supplies and offers of help. Embarrassed that he'd slept through most of the confrontation, but proud he'd woken up in time to call the police. Loretta made lunch for everyone while Axel worked. Sandwiches for the FBI agents, the police officers keeping watch, Mr. Patterson, who stayed to help. Her small kitchen became crowded with people, but it felt good, safe, like having a community rally around you when you needed it most. Riley stayed close to Loretta all day, helping where she could. Handing out napkins, refilling drinks. The little girl was quiet, processing everything that was happening. The fact that she'd be leaving soon, starting a whole new life somewhere else. By late afternoon, Axel had replaced all the damaged shingles and patched the leak that had been plaguing Loretta for months. He even fixed a few other spots that looked weak. When he came down that ladder for the last time, his shirt was soaked with sweat, but he was smiling. "That roof will last you another 20 years at least," he said. Loretta looked up at her house, at the repairs this unlikely stranger had made. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For all of it." But Axel wasn't done. He called a friend, someone who owed him a favor and wasn't connected to the club. Within an hour, a contractor showed up with glass and materials. By evening, Loretta's broken windows were repaired too. Not temporary fixes, but proper repairs that would last. You didn't have to do all this, Loretta kept saying. Yes, I did, Axel replied simply. You put yourself in danger for us. For people you didn't even know. This is the least I can do. As the sun started to set, Daniel told them it was time to go. A car was waiting to take Axel and Riley to the safe house. From there, it began the process of becoming new people, with new names in a new place. Riley burst into tears when she realized what was happening. She threw her arms around Loretta's waist and wouldn't let go. I don't want to leave, she sobbed. I want to stay with you, Loretta's heart shattered. She knelt down, ignoring the pain in her knees, and held Riley's face in her hands. Oh, baby, I want you to stay too. But you have to go somewhere safe. Somewhere those bad men can never find you. But what if I forget you? What if I forget what you look like? Loretta went to her mantle and took down a photo. It was one of her and Raymond from their wedding day, young and happy and full of hope. She turned it over and tucked a more recent photo behind it. One Mr. Patterson had taken just that morning of Loretta and Riley making sandwiches together, both of them smiling. You take this, Loretta said, handing Riley the recent photo. And whenever you miss me, you look at it and remember that there's a grandma who loves you very much. Even if she can't see you, she's thinking about you every single day. Promise? Riley whispered. I promise. Axel was struggling to hold himself together. When he looked at Loretta, his eyes were red. I don't know how to thank you. You gave us shelter when we had nowhere to go. You stood up two dangerous men to protect us. You treated us like family when we were strangers. Your family, Loretta said firmly. Blood doesn't make family. Love does. Choice does. And I chose you both the moment I called you onto my porch out of that storm. Axel pulled her into a hug, this big tough biker with his tattoos and his leather vest. And he wept on her shoulder like a child. You're the mother I never had, he said. The grandmother Riley deserved. I'll never forget you. Never. They loaded into the car, Riley clutching the photo and a stuffed bear, Axel carrying their few belongings. As the car pulled away, Riley pressed her face to the window, waving frantically. Loretta waved back, standing in her driveway until the car disappeared from view. Daniel stayed behind for a few minutes. The club members will be arrested within the week, he told Loretta. With Axel's testimony and the evidence, they're looking at serious prison time. You won't have to worry about them anymore. What about Axel and Riley? Where will they go? I can't tell you that, ma'am. It's for their protection and yours. But I can tell you they'll be taken care of. New home, new school for Riley, job assistance for Axel. They'll have a chance at a normal life. After he left, Loretta stood alone in her quiet house. It felt emptier than it had in years. Emptier even than those first days after Raymond died. She'd gotten used to hearing Riley's laughter, to Axel's quiet presence, to feeling needed again. The story made the local news within days. Elderly woman helps FBI bring down criminal enterprise. They left out most of the details, protecting Axel and Riley's identities, but the basics were there. How Loretta had sheltered a whistleblower and his daughter, standing up to intimidation and violence. People she hadn't spoken to in years called to check on her. The community rallied, setting up a fund to help with any remaining repairs and to make sure she was financially stable. Donations poured in from strangers who'd heard her story. More money than she'd seen in decades, but more than the money, people in town started treating her differently. With respect, yes, but also with warmth. Invitations to church socials. Offers to help with groceries. Neighbors stopping by just to check in. The whole experience had reminded people what community was supposed to be about. Loretta used some of the donation, money, to start volunteering at the youth center downtown. She worked with troubled kids, teenagers who reminded her of Axel in some ways. Young people who'd made mistakes or come from hard situations and just needed someone to believe in them. 3 months passed, then 4. Loretta thought about Axel and Riley every single day, wondered where they were, hoped they were happy and safe. Then one Tuesday afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address, postmarked from a city she didn't recognize. Inside was a single page, written in Axel's careful handwriting. Dear Miss Loretta, we can't tell you where we are, but we wanted you to know we're safe. We have a small house with a yard. Riley started school and she's making friends. I got a job at an auto repair shop. Legitimate work, no club business. Every night we look at your photo and Riley tells me stories about you, about making pancakes and reading books and learning that families come in all forms. You saved our lives, not just from the club, but from a life without hope. You showed us what real courage looks like, what real love looks like. We think about you every day. Riley calls you Grandma Loretta and talks about you to her new friends. I call you the angel who appeared in the storm when we needed one most. Thank you for giving us a second chance. Thank you for being our family when we had no one else. We love you. Axel and Riley. Tucked in with the letter was a photo. Axel and Riley standing in front of a small blue house, both of them smiling genuinely for the first time since Loretta had known them. Riley was holding a certificate, some kind of achievement from school. Axel had his arm around her shoulders. Looking proud and peaceful, Loretta placed the photo on her mantle right next to the ones of Raymond and Claire. Her family. All of them. The ones who'd left this world and the ones who had to leave her life but stayed in her heart. That evening, she sat on her porch watching the sunset. Loretta thought about how strange life was. How one storm, one moment of compassion, one choice to help strangers could change everything. She'd lost her husband and daughter to death. Thought she'd spend her final years alone with memories, but she'd been wrong. She'd found family again in the most unexpected way. She'd been reminded that she still had strength, still had purpose, still had love to give, and somewhere out there, in a place she'd never see. A man and his daughter were living free because she'd made the choice to shelter them from a storm. Not just the rain that night, but the storm of violence and fear that had been chasing them. Sometimes, Loretta thought, angels don't have wings. Sometimes they just have courage and kindness, and a porch light left on for strangers in need. Sometimes, saving someone else's life is exactly what you need to save your own. The end.